Progressives are just racist liars who suffer badly from cognitive dissonance. Let me explain. Progressives keep telling us that this is a deeply flawed country, that the United States is racist in so many ways, that people of color can't get ahead, they can't advance, they're being held back. And yet at the same time, we all know this, that there are millions of people of color from around the world who have come to the United States and are still trying to get into the United States. Don't those things seem to be contradictory? Are we to assume that all these immigrants, people of color who want to come here, are masochistic morons who just want to come here and suffer the slings and arrows of abject racism? Because if you're not willing to assume that, then what's the other possibility? The other possibility is that the progressives are both lying and are themselves racist, because they assume that all these people of color must be idiots, don't know any better, don't know as much, don't understand as well as the elites in this country, who are, after all, mostly white. All we ever hear about is how racist this country is. We have institutional racism, structural racism, systemic racism, and my favorite, invisible racism. It's very hard to combat invisible racism, too. We're told that people of color can't get ahead. That's why Maxine Waters isn't in Congress and hasn't been there for decades. That's why Barack Obama ran for president and lost, I assume. So they tell us the country's so racist, but it raises the obvious question. Why have so many people of color come here? Why do they keep coming here? By the millions, legally and illegally. Over the last 40 years, about 2 million people from sub-Saharan Africa, black people, have come voluntarily, willingly, to the United States. That's 4 times the number of slaves who were brought here over several centuries in early American history. 4 times as many. What are we to assume? Why would black people, 2 million black people, want to move to the United States just to suffer from racism at the hands of white people? What can you conclude? Either the degree of racism in this country is being, overblown, exaggerated by the left, or these Africans coming here must be morons. It's got to be one or the other. Since 1980, at least 15 million Hispanics have come to the United States. We don't know. That's at least. There could be more. There's probably a lot more. The number may be as high as 30 if you include illegals. Are all these people stupid? Are they morons too? Why would they want to come to such a racist country? Does that make any sense? Since 1980, about 10 million Asians, East Asians, South Asians have come to the United States. They're people of color. They're victims of racism. Are they also morons who want to come here and suffer at the hands of the white majority? Total that all up. Tens of millions of people of color have come here in the last 40 years. Why? Are they just all morons who want to suffer racism at the hands of white people? Or is the left exaggerating the extent of racism in this country? I'm not saying there's no racism. I'm saying is the left grossly exaggerating how much racism there is in this country. What's the explanation for this? Well, it's really a simple one. The world's not perfect today. It never has been perfect. The relative virtues of any country are just that, relative. You have to compare things to other countries. We're not a perfect country. But I would argue that the places from which these tens of millions of people have come are even less perfect. And that's why they come here. At the turn of the last century, when my Sicilian ancestors came here, they faced antagonism. They faced racism. They faced discrimination. In 1891, 11 Sicilians were lynched, the biggest mass lynching in U.S. history. 1913 in Tampa, and I know about this because I've lived there, 2 Sicilians were lynched. What am I to conclude from what the progressive left is telling me? My ancestors were morons? My ancestors were masochists? They wanted to come here? Why not look at the question the other way? If things were so bad here, and they were for Sicilians, how much worse did they have to be in Sicily that they wanted to get the hell out of that place? About that same time, the turn of the last century, Jews, large numbers of Jews were coming here, especially from Eastern Europe. The United States wasn't free of anti-Semitism. It still isn't. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the United States at that point. And yet, why did they come here? Were they sitting around in their villages in Eastern Europe saying, let's go to the United States so we can suffer anti-Semitism from white people? No. As I said, all things are relative. As bad as things were here, at least they weren't facing the pogroms they were facing in Eastern Europe from the Russians or the Poles or any of the other ethnic majorities in the areas where the Jews lived. So they came here. And the ones who came were the lucky ones, because the ones who didn't come, World War II, Holocaust, many of them were just exterminated. Families wiped out. The U.S. wasn't perfect a century ago. The U.S. isn't perfect now. The U.S. will never be perfect. No country established and run by human beings who are by their very nature finite can ever be perfect. That's the bottom line. Racism exists here, racism exists everywhere. But despite that, tens of millions of people from around the world have voted with their feet. They've left their home countries behind and moved to the United States. And progressives can't seem to put their hands around that issue. Why would all these people want to come here if we're such a racist state? It makes no sense. Why can't they see that? This whole issue is, I think, epitomized by Donald Trump's infamous wall. If you listen to the Democrats and you believe what they say, we wouldn't need a wall. All we would have to do is put up warning signs. This country suffers from institutional, structural, systemic, and invisible racism. Do not enter. And all these people of color from around the world would say, oh my God, I'm heading home. I'm going back. We wouldn't need a wall. If this country was as bad as the progressive Democrats are telling us, maybe we would need a wall, but it would be a wall to keep people in, because there'd be masses of these people of color fleeing the country for home, fleeing back to their original countries or continents from whence they came. Do we see that happening? Do we see masses of people leaving the country? Do we see our population dropping? Not that I've noticed. Cognitive dissonance involves a belief in two things that are contradictory, two things that can't simultaneously exist. And that's what we're seeing being practiced by the progressive left. On the one hand, we're this deeply racist country, racist against people of color. And yet at the same time, we see tens of millions of people of color trying to get in legally and illegally. That makes no sense. Either the country isn't anywhere nearly as racist as the left claims it is, or these people of color coming in by the tens of millions must all be morons. And to think that is itself a form of racism. And if the progressive left doesn't think that, then they're liars. So are they racist or are they liars? It's not a really good choice. They haven't placed themselves in a position where we're left with very good choices. Another element of racism that's inherent in this issue is a simple one. If you look at these tens of millions of people of color coming from, East Asia, South Asia, there's 1 billion people in India. There's another billion in China. Latin and South America, the Caribbean, Africa, south of the Sahara, the Middle East. All people of color, for the most part. The other racist assumption about this is that these people who at home have all kinds of political differences. Look at the politics of India, the politics of Korea, the politics of Japan, the politics of Latin America, the politics of sub-Saharan Africa. It's not like everybody in India politically thinks alike, or Korea, or Taiwan, or China, or Uganda, or Kenya, or Nigeria. The people in these countries all have distinct political beliefs. They believe different things. Some are to the right, some are to the left, some are in the middle, all kinds of variations in between. But look at what the progressive left thinks should happen when they come here. Black people should speak with a black voice. Brown people should speak with a brown voice. Asian people should speak with an Asian voice, etc. That's what we've been told. That's the expectation. But why? Isn't that racist? To assume that people from Nigeria who have all kinds of political, ethnic, religious differences, when they come to the United States, are going to all think exactly alike? Vote exactly alike? Not only is that racism, it's moronic on the part of the progressive left in this country to assume that. To assume that people who at home had all these political differences that come to the United States and suddenly become of one mind. Think like one unit. Like bees in a hive. I think this was epitomized by Joe Biden when he said during that radio interview, if you're not voting for me, you ain't black. There's two assumptions here. Again, all black people think alike. All black people should vote alike. And it's the same for the brown people and the yellow people and all these other people. And of course, how they should vote when they vote alike is determined by whom? By the white progressive elites. They're the ones who define blackness, brownness, Asianness. They're the ones. Again, another form of progressive left racism. We're being fed an unending, around the clock narrative of lies, contradictory lies, lies based on racist assumptions, lies that reek of cognitive dissonance. That's why I said in my opening to this video that the progressive left is guilty of a whole collection of racist lies. They're feeding us a narrative that ultimately makes no sense.